are meaningful for society, for people. And I come from a family of scientists and physicians, hard scientists, developmental biologists. My sister, I'm a graduate of Swarthmore College. My sister was an advisee of Scott Gilbert. So we have a little connection there that she'll be delighted to hear about because I was the one person in my family who understands very little about biology. But through a career in consulting, I was drawn to some of the more complicated challenges of solving for product development and commercialization, and the more complicated challenges I found in the life sciences industry. Life sciences industry I would define as biopharmaceutical and medical technology and medical device developers, so people who create the products and commercialize the products. And so that's how I, in a sense, found my way to semiotics initially through Malcolm Evans 25 years ago in a bar in Moscow, studying beer in Russia. And subsequently, as I moved into the life sciences industry, I discovered that their hard science approach to product development does not do them any services. We can talk for many hours about that, but the process of developing a drug or a device is extremely technical. The investment is significant. The regulatory process is very strict. And so all of the billions and billions of dollars, euros, et cetera, that get invested are really being invested so they can get to the next stage of approval in the stage gate process for regulatory approval, and the next and the next. And so taking considerations outside the mechanistic, let's say, process of the biology is not really done in this field. And it's a shame. So I'll talk a little bit about that. Anyhow, so for the last 10 years, my company Luminous has been focused on the life sciences. And we found our way into the exploration of biosemiotics, which I would say we're at the very beginning stages of, with the help of Yogi and others, through first semiotics, looking at trying to understand obesity and why is it in our, once we had anti-obesity medications, why is it that our culture doesn't accept obesity as a physiological condition, as a metabolic maladaptation, as a semiotic corruption of our metabolic system. There was actually a social cultural issue, a barrier. And so initially in my journey, I thought, well, semiotics can help here in understanding why and how it is that, how can we get people to have a conversation with their physicians, or how can we get physicians to unravel their own perceptions of how they relate with patients and have a conversations about weight and metabolic health that is different, and not to presume, as we do culturally, certainly in Western culture and particularly in American Puritan culture, let's say, that weight is a function of your discipline only. And Manuela might speak to that. No, you're not. Okay. All right. So that's where I entered the conversation. And then on further research, and this becomes the foundation of now every conversation I have with any medical technology or biopharmaceutical company. A number of pieces of research have surfaced that only 20% of health outcomes are attributable to factors in clinical care, meaning your health outcome is determined largely by environmental factors, psychological factors, and sociological factors. So if you're a biopharmaceutical or medical technology or medical device company, your product's contribution to a positive health outcome is less than 10%. The 20% includes the relationship an individual has with their physician, their access to care, fundamental, yes, the relationship they have, the communications, the interaction, the capabilities of that physician, their understanding of the condition, their understanding of the available therapies, and their ability to prescribe and support the patient. The rest are commonly referred to as the social determinants of health, but even further, environment, culture, sociology, daily habits and behaviors, and so on, and socioeconomic factors. So where we start with in our work is saying to these organizations that if you want your products and services to be as effective in the real world as they are in the lab, you need to expand your lens of understanding. And I would imagine in this room that lands, everybody nods and yes, that's on it. It's actually extremely difficult to get them to do so because of what I mentioned earlier. I mean, every dollar is invested in product development and mechanistic science. But actually, as we've started to apply semiotics and biosemiotic approaches and thinking in different fields of medicine and different specialties, we see a lot of commonalities. Ooh, fancy. We see a lot of commonalities across conditions, not just in the development, but also in our understanding as a society and as a culture and in multiple cultures as to the difference between clinical medicine and wellness. There is a huge gap, huge gulf in our ways of thinking about that. So we've taken on the biopsychosocial clinical model. This begins to help us get some common discourse or common way of talking with our clients. And I want to point out something to you, which we talk to our clients quite a bit about. I already mentioned, I think this is easier, that the primary focus of product development and R&D is in sort of really the biochemistry, right? So they don't even take all of the factors of biology into account. And the primary focus in these companies, right? These are profit-driven companies, in their market research work is really on some aspects of psychology, particularly behavior and attitudes and beliefs. And even there, the life sciences industry is behind many other consumer industries, consumer goods industries, in that they tend to go to customers and do traditional customers, consumers, patients, healthcare providers, and do traditional market research where they ask questions. They put something in front of them, a possible product, an idea, and they say, do you like it? So it's very cognitively based, right? So getting beneath the surface is not something that they have a lot of experience in. So by reminding them of the biopsychosocial model, let me say, and by bringing semiotics and biosemiotics ideas and and lenses and ways of taking into account or factors to look at, we've really started to expand their lens. What's interesting is they don't really think about the social dimensions, the social and cultural dimensions. That has been very low-hanging fruit. As again, the obesity example is a perfect example. If our society and us, if we believe that obesity is a disease of personal discipline or a condition as a result of personal discipline, then it doesn't factor into the clinical conversation at all. So that's a good example of that. So I'm just going to talk briefly about two examples, early Alzheimer's. And this is an example of expanding the lens of what we looked at. And it's, I would say, a pretty instrumental use of semiotics, more semiotics than biosemiotics. And in this case, we combined semiotics analysis with discourse analysis. And this is a great example of finding the gap between the scientific discourse, which is sort of on the left side of this page, and the broader cultural discourse about aging. The challenge of this work, and for this client, and it remains a huge challenge, I think it's also going to be relevant for the MAST project, is that people avoid a diagnosis of Alzheimer's and Parkinson's and neurodegenerative diseases. More recently, the science is telling us, the scientific research is telling us that many neurodegenerative conditions their root cause is metabolic health. I think they're starting to call Alzheimer's type 3 diabetes. So these are actually conditions that theoretically could be diagnosed at a much earlier time. And that is particularly valuable when the symptoms are the types of symptoms that we want to hide about or we deny, and whether it's us having them ourselves or our partners, our children observing memory loss or anything else, that is something that people really just avoid actually for some number of years. And the late diagnosis is a problem. Also very interesting in this case was this huge contrast, as I mentioned, between clinical discourse and cultural discourse, in which in the clinical discourse, the language is very measured, very mechanistic, And the scientific community had adopted the amyloid plaque hypothesis of Alzheimer's, which is the buildup of plaque in the brain, as sort of the place where all the investment should go in developing new therapies. And in reality, as I said, there are now recognitions that maybe some of those proteins in those plaques aren't so bad after all, that yes, there is plaque buildup. Maybe removing the plaque isn't such a good idea. And maybe the neuroinflammation is also a problem, which just goes to show you it's a complex condition and there are many factors that need to be treated. So we could already see a shift in the discourse there and a recognition that taking a hypothesis as enough of a strong basis to invest billions of dollars of research and end up with therapies, monoclonal antibody-based therapies that are very moderate in their impact. So we really don't have ways to treat Alzheimer's, was almost a wrong turn by the scientific community. Quite startling conclusion. On the other end of the spectrum, though, the longevity discourse, the desire to live longer and better, and that taking up, and the concern and the fear of these types of conditions and the impact on society were so strong. It was a big contrast in the way that from the mechanistic clinical discourse. And of course, we also have the extreme, the tech titans who are trying to live forever and looking at AI to help them do that, and various other technologies. So one kind of slightly more instrumental application. And this ultimately led to, which is still in development, ideas, recommendations, suggestions of how to maybe rethink how we think about Alzheimer's symptoms, how we think about living with Alzheimer's and other similar conditions, and appreciating neurodiversity. Also, how to support patients. If you understand the condition differently, how do you support patients? How do you facilitate an early diagnosis? How do you make more socially acceptable disease education? And also, how do you educate physicians and communicate the science? This is my last example. So this is one I'm particularly excited about, although for the industry, it's not very compelling because growth hormone deficiency is a rare disease and it's treated with growth hormone, natural occurring hormone, and it's no longer a sexy branded, patent protected therapy. However, it's a great example of, I think, a biosemiotic approach to life sciences in that healthy growth and development of children is such a touchstone in our human experience. So both as a parent, you look to your child and that beautiful, I don't have children, but I see my godchildren and my nieces and nephews growing, and the experience of watching that and the expectation that comes from watching a child develop and grow is so critically important. But in the end of the day, if you think about it biosemiotically, growth hormone deficiency is a relational condition. It has a pathophysiology. It's a lack of a growth hormone, but it is surface diagnosed. It is experienced in relationships. And the first way it's experienced is sometimes through bullying in the school, sometimes also through mismanaged expectations between parent and child, or the primary care pediatrician is telling the parents your child isn't growing as expected, which is just a measurement that's taken at every appointment. But the actual diagnosis, and in the United States, we have the requirement to be reimbursed for the diagnosis to be undertaken and reimbursed by the insurance company. You have to have certain protocols in place. You have to have reached a certain metric, et cetera. It's a very complicated and unpleasant diagnostic process after years of tracking growth in physicality. And so it's a very traumatic experience. And once it's diagnosed, the treatment is very easy. It's an injection of growth hormone on a regular basis. It has to happen at a certain time before the growth plates close. So the pressurized environment, socially, culturally, emotionally, and psychologically, really supersedes the biology and the physiology of the condition. And the relationship experience of once a child is on growth hormone and grows and all of a sudden their physical size matches our understanding of their age, right? Parents report that the relationship with their child changes. So relationship informs diagnosis. Relationships to some extent impacts treatment, and ultimately it also impacts relationships as the child develops. In this particular case, we did this work because there is a very well-established treatment. As I mentioned, it's a once daily injection, and some innovations have led to once weekly injection. Now, in the business world, people, the client in this case, this is a home run. This is fantastic. We have once weekly instead of, who wouldn't want to have once weekly injection? Well, again, culturally, and the way that the family unit dealt with growth hormone deficiency was that the daily injection became part of a healthy growth routine, a healthy routine. Every day we brush our teeth, every day we read a book, every day we say our prayer before we go to sleep, and we take the injection too. And to remove that became actually not that easy. The solution from the client's perspective was to adopt once weekly treatment for children who were becoming more independent. So adolescents who wanted to do their own injections and growing up and finding their lifestyle that they weren't at home every night with their parents, and they learned how to self-inject, and it became a rite of passage to take a once weekly instead of a once daily, or it is becoming that. So this integration of the other non-biological factors in diagnosis and treatment options, and when they come into play and when they don't, I find fascinating, and something that should inform how we invest and how we bring products and services to market. So those are my examples. Thank you.
All right. Sure. So good morning, everyone. So I'm Vladimir Djurovic. I'm French with Serbian roots. I hold applied mathematics degree from engineering degree from École Centrale de Paris in France, and I also have a master degree in management science and engineering from Shanghai, Jiaotong in China. Yes, ni hao, Tatya. And then for the last 24 years, so I moved to China the year you had actually the first gathering of Biosemiotics, just a big year. I moved to China that year, and I lived there since then. When I arrived in China, my first, in parallel of my studies, I had a job for Galeries Lafayette, and I encountered, the department store from France. Probably you've been shopping there. And I had a weird question at that time that struck my kind of engineering mind, the training in mathematics and stuff. But the topics was like, how can I leverage the brand to make the success in China for our department store? Leverage the brand. I was like, what's a brand? What's everything? So I kind of start to self-learn branding, reading books, and getting interested in it. And because I was in the right place at the right time, good conditions, I don't know, good ecology maybe in your terms, it happened that I very boldly started a company, just to do branding. And I think, and it has been my work for the last 20 years. It started like that. And we expanded from China to France, to New York, to Singapore. So it's now a global company with about 100 people working with me. But this kind of commercial success is not what I'm most proud of. What I'm mostly proud of is that it offers me the opportunity to still be pondering about my question, what's a brand? While I'm quite being free to be even with you here today. yeah, I think this is my entry point. You know, each of why I'm here. I think each of us have different entry points. Healthcare, maybe spirituality. We'll hear about more about that later. Maybe I'm wrong. For me, it's the brand, and yeah, I have to be thankful for in this journey of understanding the brand. I've been curious. I've been searching for answers, and in 2007, I encountered Malcolm again, probably in a bar in Shanghai, and got my first training in what we call applied semiotics, not applied biosemiotics, and the first stage level semiotics. Which and I've been interested in other type of science to kind of blend into my pursuit of understanding how brand plays a role in the process of enterprise, so to say. And then yeah, I've been interested in complexity, in also metaphysics. Maybe sounds natural for you to think about it, the connection, maybe not. But anyway, for me, I did that because of some thinking about teleology, because in a way, especially metaphysics and idealism, because somehow people tend to believe in brands. I mean, I'm quite surprised, actually, if you think about it, why people think why there is such a belief in brands in corporation. It's quite kind of bizarre, because it's a very, I don't know if it's a symbolic form, as we called yesterday, or something, or a code, or what is a brand? You will tell me better. You can tell me. Actually, I expect from this meeting that you tell me a little bit. So that's the open question for all of you here, and because I think, yeah, we'll come to that. So yeah, I think in this journey of that's how last year, until last year, I haven't heard too much of biosemiotics. I've heard about biosemiotics maybe 10 years ago when Malcolm at the SemioFest talked about it, and then it was kind of latent. And then last year in Lisbon, there was a SemioFest, something we do for applied semiotics, and there is Yogi and Malcolm, and somehow they hook me there and say, probably Vlad, your scientific background, and that maybe it's relevant for us to be part of that. So that's how I came in, that's the genesis of how I'm here. And there's also some lucky things that Yogi traveled to Shanghai and Asia earlier this year. So we spent more time exchanging. So, and that formed this panel with these lovely people here. And we are here today with these various perspectives, and with you all here to kind of reflect on something a little bit new, a bit stretch, as we call in commercial semiotics. So we stretch a bit the mind to kind of open new space, and and I think you're all about interdisciplinary epistemologics and everything. So I think you will be very happy to do that. So what's the point actually for me? Just to get a little bit more, I think the point is like branding is still vague to me, and probably vaguer for you, but still vague for me. And I think yesterday introduction from Kalevi was very eye-opening for me. Actually, it was very interesting, almost provocative thought about vagueness. But I mean, I was living with that for some time. I feel like a little bit reconciliated with acceptance of not understanding well and having different definitions. I think, yeah, I think what unites maybe all of us in this room is that we're tackling with difficult questions, potentially impenetrable questions, and yeah, I think another thing, another music I heard, some notes I heard and I resonated with, was when you mentioned the fact that biosemiotics were under the radar, which kind of give you some freedom for I don't know how, for some experience or research, or kind of breaking the rules, or kind of maybe breaking or getting out of the sphere of the traditional science by that. So I think, yeah, I resonate with that. And I think in a way for branding and what we do in my way of work. I think you hear about marketing a lot, which is potentially the mechanistic version, the reductionist version of it, and branding is probably the one that has a little bit more to it, where there's more semiosis into it, or potentially where I see the big potential is, and that's why after 20 years, I keep learning and kind of figuring out the vision of my own company. I feel like brands have incredible power. Actually, brands have this power because actually you talk about semiosis, it's open. I mean, just to talk before, there's this question about being open. So it's not totally deterministic. And in a way, I mean, it's quite beautiful to think that in our professional work, we have a way to break out of the past, to build the world, actually meaning making, but actually world making. And yeah, so just three things about how brands change the world, because I think this is, and bizarrely, three things like, come on, yeah, I didn't plan it on purpose, but you can relate it. I'm sure it will create some for you, stimulate your imagination. The first way is about what I call leadership or identities, like what we do in branding. As you know, we do define a positioning. Probably you heard about that. We strategize and we create an identity. Which is actually interesting, maybe for you when we talk about firstness. I don't know, maybe you will think about, in our practice, we have strategy and identity. So kind of, but well, it's a code basically with two sides, right? So still like this kind of first part of identity, we can seeing it's like what we find in regular semiotics, the structural semiotics, could actually suffice to that part. And this is mostly about valorizing the benefit of a brand, of a product. So let's say it's very down to earth, and probably earlier in the history or the philology of branding or enterprise is like this valorization of the benefit. But then there's two other powers of the brand. The two other powers, the second one is experience. It's like meaningful connections, quality connections. So this is where we could also use traditional or creative semiotics for creativity. You know, we have in our field of applied semiotics, we talk about emerging codes, or we will recode things in order to get that. And that's actually when we create experiences, is probably in the field of creating a universe, which is one dimension of the brand, the kind of the one that will be appealing to the consumer, not necessarily with the benefit. So it's a bit technical, but I don't go too much into that rabbit hole. But the other thing is is something I discovered last year at Lisbon. It was about liminality or rituals or other techniques that could be used to basically enhance experiences, and it's used for in people curating exhibitions or things to kind of make the interaction you do with customer more transformative. And so there are other techniques that could be used, and probably there could be even techniques from biosemiotics at the second level of experience. The third level is where biosemiotics is potentially the most important. And guess what it is? The third power of the brand is actually to help an enterprise sustain in time or get the resource from its environment. So from founding at the beginning to kind of sustaining in time, actually this is actually seeing the enterprise as an organism that needs to sustain in time. I think this is what you're doing. And this comes with negentropy, with probably many terms that are linked with ecology, maybe also. So what you do in biosemiotics, I think the niche concept is very interesting for in that aspect. And I had another one for this one. It will come back, but I know that I had the niche and another one. But so just to wrap up that aspect, right now after 20 years that we are doing I'm doing the branding. I come up with the vision that brands have the power to change the world. In your way, you can talk about meaning making or even building the world if the world is made of meaning. And that opens a lot of potential and also create a lot of responsibilities. And that's in that sense, I think all the niche topic that we talk about. And the second thing I was thinking about was the formation of habits, because this is something that I discovered in Persian, reading a little bit the fundamentals of Persian thinking and how the formation of law, that's the dynamic process. I feel like when we try to sustain a brand or an enterprise, actually one of the tools we try to do is to use is create a corporate culture. A culture. The term is interesting, and in this culture we try to form habits of ways of working. It's kind of automatizing a certain thing, but why people will align with that? There is a bit of theology question about the vision behind, the use of a vision, defining a vision, part of the definition, and how people align around that. So there is this direction we set, and to conclude, it opens a lot of possibility to think about brands, really open the eyes and say, well, there's a commercial world, it's capitalistic. Okay, but brands are actually an extremely interesting device to change the world. That's what I want to say. Open a lot of possibility. Potentially biosemiotics can help make it and can also help inform the, let's say, the responsibilities that come with it, with concepts like niche or some other ones. That's for my sharing this morning. Thank you.
Bear with me while I put my hair in. Oh dear. Is it working? Good. Amazing. Well, I think you already know my name because of the screen. So I'm Lucia Laurent-Neva. I just want to give you a little bit of background about me. I was born in Colombia, and then I moved into the UK, and I married to a French guy. So that's important in this story. The second thing is I'm a designer and an anthropologist and a semiotician. So you can imagine that I believe in the power of togetherness, convergence. And I came to semiotics through design. In design, we had Persian semiotics. We had 4 years of semiotics. And for me, it was making sense. You study design, you need to study semiotics. There's no way around that. And then I moved to London. I became an anthropologist, and I specialized in material culture, especially in mass consumption theories. I don't know if you know Daniel Miller, some of you as an anthropologist, so I started with him, and it was just, and for me it was so obvious. I mean, you have design, you have semiotics. It needs to work with anthropology. And anthropologists, they were saying, Lucia, you're totally crazy. Semiotics has nothing to do here, because I mean, in some anthropological circles, semiotics is regarded as, kind of, I'm not going to get into the details, but they didn't see that connection. And I was just like, look, this is something here. And you know what? I have the same thing now with biosemiotics. The reason why I started with biosemiotics was because of the patterns I was seeing in design from a design point of view. And I've been talking a lot about biosemiotics, not only with my clients. I mean, I'm not a biosemiotician as such. I just have a passion for it. And I can see the potential, not only for semiotics, but for the world overall. I'll show you some ideas and examples later on. But what I feel with this, for those who don't know me, I'm also I'm one of the co-founders of SemioFest. And within SemioFest, I tried to push the biosemiotics agenda a little bit, try to invite or suggest topics from biosemiotics when we can. And I think Yogi has been part of it, many, many times. And of course, you will be welcome to propose topics, and I'll try to do as much as I can to support your ideas there. So just to say that, because I had the fortune, I guess. In my company, I started academically with semiotics in 2001, mainly Persian design semiotics. And then I started my own company in 2010. Oh my God, I'm getting old now. So, and of course you have ups and downs in the journey. You need to understand the world. And I think I had the fortune of working with big organizations, profit and non-profit organizations across all the continents. And one of the issues I see, apart from, yes, packaging, you probably have seen the packaging in supermarkets and we deal with that. But all the time, what I've seen is a constant, there are big questions being asked within commercial environments. And sometimes I think that the only answer to that is biosemiotics. And one of those questions, of course, is the idea of life and death. And I feel fortunate that, in sometimes I had projects that we had to face the inevitability of death. We have done semiotics of cancer for different types of cancer, like glioblastoma or lung cancer, prostate cancer, but not only from a semiotics perspective, from an anthropological perspective, and facing that. Brands and in branding, we're always thinking about living well. We have to live well, living well. But what about dying well? What do we need to demystify death as well? Because this is something that in the branding world, we are not so used to talked about. And facing those projects, I also kind of came across with the journey, with the transitions. And lucky enough as well, I work a lot with the World Food Programme with the United Nations. And that has been a really wonderful place to be for being a semiotician, because mainly we have been working about food and the role of food. And recently, I just wanted to show you this. I was working on a project in Bangladesh for, I don't know if you're familiar with the conflict in Myanmar with all the Rohingya refugees flying from. I was working in the camps. And what was interesting, and what Yogi was saying yesterday about semiocide was exactly what was happening to those refugees. They came to the camps and they just really didn't have a place. All their meaning was stripped out from them. And when we started the project, it was all about nutrition and how people connect with food. And I said, wait a second, let's go. We need to go to the camps. We need to see how people are living, how they make sense of things. And within that, the first thing I saw, if you can see on the left, is just how they put all nature elements in their doors. I mean, let's call it doors. And it was interesting because the more you talked about it, the thing they missed most from Myanmar was nature. It was, for them, not objects, it was nature, the smell. And then the more you go through the camps, I mean, just a caveat here is this is a process. It's not immediately they just go and build the garden. But you see, the first thing was building a garden as well, because it connected them to life. It gave them a sense about repair, which it was really interesting. So the conversation with the World Food Programme, it was about food, but it was about the connection with meaning within the camps and what they were losing from that transition that they were going and moving from. So that was important. And for me, of course, I don't apply all the theories, but I sense that is something really important here. And we started working about sensory, the sensory of rice, it's at different levels of stages here. So this is something that I feel that if we approach more the ideas of life and death and transition, we could also help brands, instead of discarding things, we can just give them a second life with dignity. We can just think about those processes in a way, but equally that we can let biosemiotics could learn about that, academic biosemiotics, I mean, to be more approachable, to demystify itself a little bit and be more approachable to other commercial semioticians so they can apply it more and more. Another thing, or another concept that I feel is quite important in my projects is the sensory attunement. I think from design, what I learned it was to see a lot. In anthropology, in design, you observe and you learn to observe, really. In anthropology, you learn to listen, to observe. But I think with biosemiotics, what I'm learning, because I'm in the process, is just this attunement with everything, with the context, with the unworld, as you call it, and being more in tune with the perceptual worlds. I'm going to show you, please don't judge me. This is a typical real example of what we have in commercial semiotics. So the next example is, I'm going to give you a little background, is a car wash company. And actually, this car wash company, they had a lot of sustainable sort of processes with water. So they were not that bad, we can say. But they had a problem. They had a tunnel that we call it the tunnel of fear. And people were not going to the car wash, right? So what we started was, look, actually, we should look into what a bubble means, what water means to people. And we started doing the semiotics of the bubbles. And the companies in Germany, in the Czech Republic, we did this project in the UK. And with IMO, we started with the bubble. What is bubbles and the positive connotations of the bubble and how people bath themselves and what is the connection, the embodiment with the bubble. And then we had the issue, so we got that, and then we have the issue of the tunnel. So in the car wash, people were just fearing that they were going to die the moment they went through the tunnel. So how can we attune them to a different experience and move them from that fear and risk to something that is a rite of passage? And that's when rituals became really important. Again, it was trying to understand some biological systems. This is, of course, this is commercial, and you were going to say, no, this is really mundane. You know, but this is, I think, is where we find value in those mundane projects that people can just actually take and live on a daily basis and live those processes. And I'm conscious of time, so last but not least, I do think there is a potential here to live a new ethics with semiotics, a new semiotics ethics that we can bring. And something that I call, and been trying to do in my practice, I call semiotics for good. It's actually trying to be involved with semiotic projects. And I do think that with biosemiotics, there is a lot of discussions that we can have together within commercial semiotics as well within biosemiotics to make it better. Because sometimes commercial semioticians that get satanized for doing projects that are very banal and vain, and well, we have to make a living, right? But actually we can make it more consciously, and we can have conversations. We can open the space to a better world. So I do think that is being more aware of the living systems will be potentially. And to close my remarks, I am here because I really, really believe that having a mutual conversation with people like us, we could take the next step, not to, you know, we have to be in the now, as Calais so many times said, but I think think about our next generations. With semiotics, we have a lot of soft power in the meeting rooms. We know a lot of people who actually take our advice. Being more conscious about that, I think, will open the possibility. So that's it from me. And yeah, welcome to the discussions.
Hello, can you hear me? Good. Yeah, fine. Looking good. I'm Malcolm Evans. I presented Hello Ludmilla at Olomouc remotely. I think it was 2 years ago. Three. I was presenting with Gareth Lewis, who is now the CEO at Space Doctors, whose wife was imminently giving birth. So we had to do it by remote. So the point of that session, where I presented things in the culture that are calling to biosemiotics, saying, come and commercialize. We need you, brands need you, because there are all kinds of things going on that make cultural semiotics no longer fit for purpose. And those things would have included the medical, you know, the way that medicine had moved from medical specialism to something more holistic, so that alternative medicine had become defining for the mainstream. The way that tech, we were being asked to talk about technical things, which the semioticians were doing culturally and psychologically, but obviously to talk about AI and changes happening in tech, we need the specialists there as well, you know. So we need hard science, hard engineering experts to be talking to culture people, to be talking to psychologists, and for there to be good interfaces. I loved your analogy of the leaf, Kalevi, you know, that bit. I forget what you called that bit. But I think that bit between the hard scientists and the culture people and the psychology bit is what the flex, the interface is what applied biosemiotics can offer, because mainstream brand semiotics, which has been going since the late 1980s, has been a culture and communications expertise, which initially had a lot to offer to marketing, because it was essentially offering the social science constructionist model, saying, you know, language builds things, culture builds things. If you're offering that at a time, how to use this creatively, the codes and the practices and the discourses to build at a time when brands are globalizing and internationalizing, at a time when brands have been financially valued for the first time. So people see that brands aren't, you know, intangibles, fresh air. They are money, they are equity. So it was a no-brainer that semiotics as a cultural expertise would step in at that time. But I was beginning to see, having read Bruno Latour saying social science constructionism can only work by bracketing the hard sciences and saying, we'll talk to you later, you know. So there is something vacuous about the social science constructionist model, which was certainly not satisfying for me. Around that time, I was visiting Tartu, thinking students are going to want to hear me tell them how to make money by working commercially in semiotics, and Kalevi is going to want to hear about where the jobs are available for his students. So I thought, I'm here with something to give, but I was converted by Kalevi's binoculars while I was telling him, you know, being Welsh, I have the problem of overstating my credentials and my value rather than understating. So while I was explaining this, Kalevi was looking at the birds, and I'm thinking, come on, you know, wait a minute. But in your garden, drinking your home-pressed apple juice with my 4-year-old and 6-year-old, it's about 16 years ago, running around, blonde heads bobbing around in the foliage, I thought, that's a scene from Mirror, that's Tarkovsky. And I said that to Kalevi, and his eyes glazed over, and I thought, oh God, I'm boring him now. And then I realized later that Kalevi was a tough, you know, that for Kalevi, as for me, Tarkovsky is the thing that comes closest in human endeavor to the creativity and beauty of nature. So I also learned from Kalevi that one of my students, Wendy Wheeler, who last I'd heard she was doing a PhD in post-structuralism. So I'd imagined that she would be off somewhere telling young women how empowering Madonna was, or something like that, you know, some post-structuralist nonsense. And then Kalevi said, Wendy Wheeler, The Whole Creature. So I read The Whole Creature, and I was converted. And There was another student there at the same time as Wendy, Virginia Valentine, who was the person who created applied brand semiotics using structuralism, doing the culture bit, thinking that it could also be a politically progressive venture in that we would create the feminist yogurt. I never believed that. You know, I thought, I'm going in there so I will join her. I said, first of all, for 2 years, I'm a Marxist deconstructionist critic. I could never work with you. You know, I will destroy my reputation. And then one day she said, I charge £700 a day. And if you will join me, so I have somebody to talk to, I'll pay you £700 a day. I said the most stupid thing I've ever said in my life. No, 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 half of that will be plenty. It's the most stupid thing I've said in my life. But anyway, so I became involved in the process of trying to persuade the biosemioticians to join us so that there's put some lead in our pencil, as we say in colloquial English, add some oomph, add some reality. So I presented at Semiofest in 16, where Kalevi introduced me as the grand old man of brand semiotics. So I come to you now. It's a post-life crisis. I come to you now as part of the zombie apocalypse, having also tried in Olomouc to reach out. Yeah. To say there is a hidden agenda. We caught one fish from the Olomouc fishing expedition, and that was Yogi, who was emailing me before we'd finished talking. And Gareth is still very excited about that encounter, Gareth Lewis, who presented with me and thinks that there are huge opportunities. I still think there are huge opportunities. Noël, at Luminous, we sold in biosemiotics for the obesity project. And when we weren't able to find a biosemiotician to join us, I suggested to Noël that we stopped calling it biosemiotics in case we got into trouble. But then after almost 3 years ago, we were sort of validated as that we were doing semiotics. So Yogi has helped us move it into what you saw, something substantial, something real. And there's a lot more opportunity there. There's a lot more space to intellectually colonize. What else can I say? Couple of things. 2 potential fish who are interested in joining us. The 2 children who are in your garden, I emailed them last night and I said, I'm in Rotterdam, and I mentioned that I was in your august presence, Kalevi, and I explained to them what a holobiont was. And then I said, I'm at a kind of Love Island for holobionts event. You know, and there is a massive opportunity for computer dating for holobionts. I mean, that's clear. So final 2 quick points for potential people who want to find out more, who want to look into consultancy for commercial. First point is that, yes, it is like rhetoric and sophism in ancient Greece. Nobody's going to pay you for that's just interesting, or, you know, you won't be doing science, you won't be doing philosophy. You will be doing a kind of sophistry. Second thing is that the world is full of experienced strategists and business people who will mediate that for you and interpret the briefs in client language, tell you what the client wants to hear, and then set you off, you know, to do exactly your, if you like, pure research within parameters, because that's where the renewal, the innovation, the refresh comes from. So it's a great way of doing research quickly with research assistance, with good remuneration, and with great clients. with a great community to be working with. Second thing is that you have to operationalize it. Tools are very, very handy, convenient. In this, I wrote an essay in this book, Fascinating Rhythms, which is a tribute to Terence Hawkes, who wrote one of the first UK published collections on semiotics. He was my PhD supervisor. So I wrote a chapter on how we moved from theory, semiotic theory, to commercial application. So that the detail is in there step by step of the kind of tools we developed. The psycho-biosocial model, which Noël and Yogi have developed, I think is the first tangible tool that biosemiotics has delivered to the repertoire. And that's the way it works. It's processes, it's tools, it's actionability, which means there has to be a so what. What are we doing with this? Which should be good for you people whose expertise is based in pragmatism or pragmaticism. And the other thing is accessibility, translating into out of the academic Mandarin into the everyday language, which is also, I mean, that is the fast track to getting biosemiotics into education at a lower level and into, you know, the use for other groups in society.
Including
commercial semioticians, yeah. But I'm currently, I had the privilege three years ago of doing some work for NATO for their communications department. And I worked for the Quakers at the same time for nothing. So I could be advocating peace on the one hand and trying to do a minimum damage by giving NATO stuff that they wouldn't be able to use anywhere under any circumstances on the other hand. So you are developing skills that are socially useful. And there are ways of minimizing the damage you do. And there is an exit strategy, you know, when you leave the business to be using these tools to do work wherever it feels valuable to you to be doing it. So this is my last semiotic, this is my post-death semiotic presentation. I'm moving on to do a PhD in conflict resolution and peace studies. So that's my next career job, using these skills. And if any of you can bring some biosemiotic skills to me for that, the military is obviously the greatest creator of revolution on earth, if you pick one sector. If you want regeneration, sustainability, fast way, stop the military, educate people not to buy into anything to do with a business model, which involves permanent warfare everywhere and profits for the arms industry and power for the generals. Thank you.